the system we're living in is incredibly violent. You talk to any First Nations person about their lives, and they can tell you stories about the violence they live every day. So, really, violence isn't part of this equation at all. What we're talking about is planetary violence, as some people say, ecocide. And people are saying, no, I'm not going to let all the species around me die off. I'm going to stand up and protect them.
Planetary violence? Ecocide, fighting back for the species? You know you're in Vancouver when this is the Chit Chat on a doorstep. Well, this wasn't just ordinary idle chit chat. This was at a training camp to teach radical activists how to physically stop pipelines. Remember, these pipelines were the subject of the last BC election. The pro-pipeline Liberals crushed the anti-pipeline NDP. They were the subject of the National Energy Board hearing, which approved the Northern Gateway pipeline. So what do you do when you lose democratically and lose to the courts? Well, you talk about considering violence, and that's where our friend Ada Slavinsky met these folks. Ada joins us now from Vancouver. She's a hard news contributor. Ada, you went out there amongst the crazies. Tell me what they said. Are they going to get violent? Are they going to have a riot? Are they going to sabotage pipelines that proceed despite their howling not to proceed?
Well, Ezra, the nicely packaged story that they're presenting to me is that they're trying to be nonviolent. They're just trying to protect the trees and the forests and the rivers and First Nations land and that kind of thing. But when you dig a little deeper and you look at some of the people who are actually attending these events, they are talking about violence and they are talking about doing some really scary things. And that's why I wanted to ask them, and I wanted to say, you want to protect the environment, but what I want to protect is the legacy for my daughter, that she's not going to walk into the street and be threatened by someone burning a cop car or that kind of thing.
What now, this was a whole thing. This was a conference. I mean, they banned you from taking your cameras into part of it, but they did have a press conference. Let's take a quick look at a press conference, and you can tell me afterwards who these people were.
Sure.
Some of the people who attended this weekend's events are advocating for violence. One gentleman actually said he wanted to burn a cop car. Do you support that? Do you agree with that?
I didn't hear. I was at the events. I didn't hear anybody say they wanted.
Were you not here for the pipeline training this weekend, though?
There was various workshops. I didn't hear anybody say that. They were talking about events that happened in New Brunswick.
No, at the Russian Hall, I was there on Saturday speaking with people, and there was a guy who went into the event and he said he wanted to burn a cop car.
Well, that's his own personal opinion. That's not my opinion.
What would you do if somebody within your group tried to...
I don't think anybody in my group would try to do that because the cops...
But he attended the workshop.
I think you've asked your questions. There's a lot of media here. I'd like you to give everyone a chance.
They didn't like you asking those questions. They didn't like you with your cameras. They didn't let you take your cameras in everywhere. Who was this event for? It clearly wasn't for the Sun News Network. What kind of folks attended, Ada?
Well, Ezra, this was Frida Hewson. She represents the Unistoten camp, which is a small group within a larger First Nations band that is against the pipeline. And the other media were asking, nice questions about what this means for First Nations and kind of what their plan is, sticking along their talking points of we're going to do peaceful blockades and, non-violent events. But I wanted to ask, I've spoken with people, and I'd like to just play a clip for you of one of the men that I did speak with at this training camp, and here's what he told me that he was actually prepared to do.
Okay.
I said, sure, I'll do it.
You would set a cop car on fire?
Sure. Well, I don't know if it's going to stop a pipeline or not, but...
And why do you think that's justified?
Well, because I'd get my charges reduced.
What's that even mean, Ada? How do you get your charges reduced by torching a police car?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think that this guy's a little bit off his rocker here. I'm not sure that his story totally checks out with some of the other things that he was telling me, but he does want to cause a disturbance. He does want to start a riot, set a cop car on fire. And I've spoken with police here in Vancouver, and they're telling me that they're concerned because this is exactly the kind of people and the kind of actions they saw in the Stanley Cup riots. Right. So maybe we'll take the protesters at their word and say that they want to be peaceful. Okay, we accept that. We don't have proof otherwise at this point. But people who are joining this cause and who are ushered into these events and attending the workshops do have other motives, and they want to cause mischief. There's graffiti all around the city saying no pipelines on bus shelters and businesses. So this is starting to replicate what we saw in 2011 with the Stanley Cup riots, and there was multiple arrests. 101 people were injured, and one person critically, police officers injured. It's something that we're seeing the developments happen in the same way that we saw there. So it's very frightening.
Ada, it reminds me of a lot of the things I've been seeing over the last 2 years. It reminds me of the Occupy Vancouver, Occupy Toronto sort of street rabble that some of them are clearly a little bit mentally touched, others of them just like a fight. And like that last guy who was rambling on about torching a cop car, that reminds me of these Occupy. And he may just be cannon fodder who is sort of turned and set by some smarter strategist, some guy orchestrating things. It reminds me a bit of the crime spree at the Westover pipeline station in Ontario. And of course, as you say, it reminds you of the Vancouver riots, the Rexton riots. I don't think it's idle because there's so much big money, Ada, from foreign lobby groups that has failed to stop these pipelines peacefully. I have no doubt that Greenpeace, for example, whose specialty is breaking the law, will try to break the law again. We only have about a minute left. Tell me, do you think police are going to take this seriously, or are they the kind of cops that we saw too much during the Occupy Wall Street events? Oh, don't touch it, let them have their say. Sure, if they were other protesters, we'd put them in paddy wagons, but this is political. How are police reacting?
Well, Ezra, I think they're prepared. Brian Montague, the spokesperson I spoke with yesterday, said that they've been monitoring these groups. He does think that most of them have been peaceful so far, and he's not worried about the large majority, but they are monitoring a small minority of people who are kind of on their watch list, and familiar faces that are showing up at things like Occupy, different protests. No one is illegal. There's the same crew kind of coming up that they're keeping an eye on, and I really think they don't want a repeat of what happened at the Stanley Cup riot. So that was a big embarrassment for the police here. So I hope they're prepared. I think from what they're telling me, they're prepared. But I don't think that we're going to see a completely peaceful protest. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure.
By the way, blocking a highway, blocking private property, occupying grounds, that's not peaceful in my books. That's a crime. Ada, you stay on this, but you stay safe too, okay?
I will. Thanks, Ezra.